So just a reminder that I've created this sort of online village, I'm calling it, uh, on a platform called School. It's called Just Be You. And it's free. And it's there where we can talk to each other about the courage required and the support required to just be yourself. And the sort of the dissolution of the people pleaser self so that we can live our own heart-centered life. And I've left a link um, to that platform, to the village in the chat. In the chat, you'll find in the lower bar, and it just says chat. And if you can either, I would copy and paste that somewhere, because when this is over, you can't pick that up. So anyways, yeah, it'd be great to have you all join the village. We can do this journey together. So again, thanks for being here. And we're going to talk about triggers, triggers. And this is an area of expertise for me because, like, I always feel like I'm being triggered and having to figure out how to deal with it, because triggers are the thing that keep us trapped inside the survivor self, I think, to the greatest degree. And by trigger, I just mean, something happens, somebody says something, uh, somebody looks at you the wrong way. Uh, it, it could be a complete stranger. Uh, and all of a sudden you find yourself like a jellyfish, that someone's poked the jellyfish and it just seizes up, goes closes in on itself, and then the only response to that is to either typically to attack or to collapse. And I just want to talk about the kind of the anatomy of a trigger, and I've made a few notes here, and what it is, in other words, what's going on when we get uh, quote unquote triggered. So I'll start by saying this: a trigger is real. It's happening in the present, but the intensity of our response to the trigger belongs to another time. So it's not that something hasn't happened. Somebody has done something or said something that has caused this contraction that we respond to either by collapsing or attacking, being defensive, whatever. So the original wound is in the past. So essentially, when we are triggered, it is the past hijacking the present every time. And I would say, under my map of reality, what the trigger is touching into is one of the core unconscious beliefs, whether it's I'm bad, I'm unsafe, I don't matter, I don't belong here, I'm powerless, I'm alone, it's always my fault, etc. So that's the tender point that's got through. And you'll remember that we built, and again, in my map, we had to figure out very early in life how to compensate for these core unconscious beliefs, which are always dreadful because all the feelings associated with them. And the feelings are mostly fear, and I would say predominantly shame. So we had to protect ourselves from that and figure out how to live without it. So the compensatory actions and beliefs is basically our ego, or our performative self, or our trying self, false self, whatever you want to use. And we built that very intelligently. We constructed it as a kind of fortress against having to bear the shame and the fear again. So it was an intelligent construction. And then just to remind you, then what happened over time is that we confuse that with our true self, with our authentic self, because we discovered that we can't be ourselves and survive. So what's getting through when we're triggered is something that it's like it's leaked. It's like there's a leak in our fortress, and it's got through, and it's touched into the original wound. And when it touches into the original wound, we either go into a state of collapse, which is to collapse into shame, to collapse into fear, collapse into withdrawal, or it's to what leaks back out the other way through the walls of the fortress uh, is anger and rage at the person who dared to touch into the original wound that we've so carefully constructed this bulwark against. And so they have made us feel this way, but really it's a failure of our fortress to prevent the collapse or the attack. That's what it is. It's a failure of the ego. And that's also the potential gift of it, because if we learn to really believe that that's what it is, to know in our bones that that's what it is, then we almost automatically shift out of victimhood, believing that somebody has done something to us that's caused us to react in a particular way, to being able to take responsibility for it and really know that, to really deeply believe that the past has hijacked the present, and I am responsible for how I respond to the trigger. It's totally on me. That's the freedom in it. That's the liberation. That's the potential liberation and the gift of the trigger, because it's an opportunity to leave the past in the past and respond to present conditions. So it's interesting to look at the metaphor of trigger, because I think it's more revealing than at first we might think, because there is the insult in the present condition. Someone's done something, said something, whatever it is. So I think in the literature that gets called the trigger, but actually we pull the trigger. It's actually us that pulls the trigger. So that something is said, done, it causes us to contract into fear, shame, or rage and attack. And then, but the pulling of the trigger into collapse or attack is ours. We pull the trigger, actually. Nobody else pulls the trigger. They might have sort of triggered us by saying something or doing something, but ultimately we have to take responsibility for actually pulling the trigger and catapulting ourselves into the condition of shame or attacking and generating more suffering than whatever it was the person who did or said did. So it's on us. And the good news in that is that it gives us back agency, where we shift out of the victimhood stance into, okay, boy, look to being mindful. Look at what happened to me. My beloved just said this or did this, and look what I'm doing with it. It's like, then we can get curious about it. Then we can start asking questions. The challenge, as we all know, is that apparently the amygdala in our brain triggers in about 1/16 of a second. So we've already fired the shot before we catch on to it, and the damage is typically done, and then we have to do a whole bunch of repair work. So always what is getting triggered is the survivor self, the self that we constructed. And that's important to keep in mind. And I think what happens is that as long as we haven't addressed the original grievance that happened in the past, which was an actual experience of shame, an actual experience of humiliation, an actual experience that caused us to be afraid, an actual experience of unkindness or some kind of abuse. So that's what needs to be addressed, that original experience. And that's saying a lot because we have to take seriously that wound. And by taking it seriously, what I mean by that is like breaking out of the mechanism of psychological denial. And when we do that, we get thrown into an experience of the original shame, humiliation, abuse, not to identify with it again, but to experience it so that in the experiencing of it, we break through the denial. And then when we break through the denial, we can grieve the original wound, grieve the truth that those people who were supposed to love us, nurture us, nourish us, actually, for whatever reasons, we don't even have to understand the reasons, but they hurt us. They broke our heart. And so I would say that every time we've experienced a trigger where our response is disproportionate to what the person has said or done, not only disproportionate, but once it goes through the interpretive filters of I'm bad, I don't belong, I'm a mistake, I'm helpless, I'm powerless, I don't matter, I'm not legitimate. Once it goes through that filtration process of our core unconscious beliefs, it lands us back in, as I've said, the original shame. And the tricky part about this is that when these filters are still in place, it is actually to the mind of our ego, it is unquestionable that this is the only way to interpret what that person has said or done. There is no other possible interpretation. We are absolutely certain that their intent was to humiliate us and hurt us. And so we have to break that certainty. That certainty, it's almost like the epistemology of the ego, because the ego knows, it just knows what's happening. So it's kind of an epistemological break with the past, because you have to learn to distrust that. You have to learn to distrust that interpretation of reality if you're going to liberate yourself from this chronic condition of living in the past. So this whole thing that I'm doing, this whole mentorship is all about liberation so that we can actually live in the present. So instead of pointing and shooting, pulling the trigger, we can gently kind of point back towards ourselves, gently, not to blame, but to be curious. And we can ask ourselves, well, first of all, we notice is like, wow, I am just slipping right back into shame. I want to attack this person I love and who loves me. And I'm sure that she or he is intending to hurt me and humiliate me. I just know it. And then because you know that not to trust that you're going to break this sort of this way of knowing, you can get curious now. And you can start to ask yourself, what is it I'm afraid of right now? What was said? Uh, what was done that caused me to collapse into the belief that I'm nobody, for example, and that I'm unlovable and unworthy? That's wow, that's deep. I feel it. I'm identified with it right now. There's no other me other than this nobody. And then you can ask like another question, what is it I'm trying not to feel? If I were to actually feel what I'm feeling instead of attacking, well, probably you'd feel your heartbreak because the person who has loved you, you've just interpreted what they've done as they've just rejected me. They've abandoned me. They don't give a shit about me. I'm nobody. So then you question that and you say, well, could that be true? What happens if it's not true? And then if you really love this person and they love you, you could have an agreement that you could go to that person every time it happens and say, and just ask the question directly and choose to believe the response. You could just ask, was it your intention to humiliate me? Because I realize I'm interpreting this as in a particular way. This is my interpretation of events. Is that is that what happened? Is that what you were doing? And I would say 95, if that's what they're actually doing, then leave the relationship. Put it that way. It's that simple. Just get out. Get the hell out of Dodge. Because if the one you love is trying to hurt you, then you've caught yourself in a you've put yourself back in the same situation that you were in growing up. And it's time to get out. Just liberate yourself. But 95 to 98% of the time, that's not what's happening. And then you can just share like how you're feeling. And all of a sudden, when you do that, you come back and you come out of yourself, you come out of the collapse into yourself. When you're in this state of collapse or attack, there is no other. The other is just enemy. The other doesn't actually exist. There's no contact. And the only response when you're triggered this deeply is either suicide, metaphorically speaking, I need to disappear to stop the heartbreak, or homicide, I need them to disappear to stop the heartbreak. Those are the only two options. So when we talk about liberation or freedom, it's not in becoming untriggerable. I've listened to a few different so-called enlightened masters. They've been asked the question, do you ever get triggered? And they smile and they say, yeah, they get triggered all the time. But it takes about a second for them to realize they've been triggered and recover. So it's not that we become untriggerable, it's that we come into a deeper, more intimate relationship with ourselves, in that we make a promise to ourselves uh, to evoke a condition of mindful self-compassion whenever it happens. We also sign off, we make a promise to ourselves and our partner that there's no excuse for attacking them. So you take violence off the table. It's just like we're not going to do that with each other. We'll do something else. I'll get curious, I'll ask questions, I'll sit down with you, I'll connect with you, whatever. So this process of liberation is a decision and some technology around liberating yourself from the past so that you can actually be present to what is actually happening, whether it's in the relationship or in the world. So I'm curious about your experience, your wisdom, your questions. Um, I'll end it there. And yeah, and turn it over to you. and happy to respond to whatever. Oh dear, two more people entered the room. To whatever comes up for you, okay? And I'll just